Good evening. Okay, I'm going to call this evening to order. My name is Richard Joy, and I'm the Executive Director of the Urban Land Institute, or ULI Toronto, and on behalf of our Chair, Michelle Ackerman, it is my pleasure to bring this evening's event to a start. Truly wonderful to see you all here today. This is, I think, the first time we've done the Fireside Chat in this venue, first time we've done this Fireside Chat in a venue that's not been in the old Board of Trade at First Canadian Place. So it feels more intimate. This is actually a perfect venue. Maybe we'll do this more often. The Fireside Chat, as many of you know, is a signature event of ULI Toronto, and we look forward every year. And over the years, we've been treated to many industry leaders sharing their business stories. And you actually can get them, they're all on record on our website if you ever want to go back in time, even just to see if people's predictions and things like that bear out. So no pressure to our guests tonight. We have indeed a terrific Fireside program, and it's, I'm going to say finally, because I think we've been after this guest for some time, so we're super pleased to be featuring Mitchell Cohen, and we'll introduce him in just a little bit. As always, though, of course, we begin with a land acknowledgement. As a Toronto region-based organization, we acknowledge that the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge, of course, that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this generation or generations past. ULI also stands in solidarity with Indigenous communities demanding action and accountability for the ongoing legacy of the residential school system. We'd also like to honor those who come here involuntarily, particularly descendants from those brought here through enslavement. I'll just quickly take in a sidebar to say that at ULI Toronto, as many of you will know, we put a lot of meaning to this, otherwise scripted land acknowledgement on all fronts. It has been a major part of our work to advance the intersection of truth and reconciliation with real estate, and it's work that's ongoing, and it's work that's going to take a long time. Similarly, you'll see very soon some work we've been doing for a long time, but some recent work that we've been doing at the intersection of systemic anti-Black racism in our city and city building and opportunities that perhaps we can chart a better path. So we just want to make sure that it's understood that when we read these land acknowledgements, that there's a lot of behind that, and you'll hear maybe a little bit more about that in some of the conversations this evening. Thank you. Tonight's event and all other ULI programming would not be possible without the support of our annual sponsors, and we'd like to thank them for that support. Now more than ever, ULI relies on the support of sponsors to put on high-quality programs and to drive our mission to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. But tonight we especially want to extend thanks to our event sponsors, and they are Castles, Diamond Schmidt, EXP, Giannone Petricone Associates, and NAC Design. Post-COVID, this is the reality, we've come to rely on event sponsors to make events like this evening viable, and we're just so grateful to all of you for your financial support for making tonight possible. So I would like a round of applause for tonight's evening. I would also like to thank, and I believe he's here, Thompson Egbo for playing such beautiful melodies during our networking reception. Thompson is an acclaimed composer and pianist, and he took piano lessons, I understand, just as a child, just at Dixon Hall, just down the street from where he grew up, right here in Regent Park. So thank you, Thompson. And we have one more special performance before we start our Fireside Chat. So please join me in welcoming another talented artist who also grew up here in Regent Park, Trevelyan Kennedy. Trevelyan, stage is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I'm going to do a spoken word performance for you guys. and I'm sure they're going to let you know where it's from. It takes vision to hold sand and see buildings. It takes even more to hold promises and find home again. You see, the journey truly is the path that is not yet done, not yet seen, not always chosen, not always clean, but it's the one that causes more to be seen. So thank you for the belief that more can come from a treasure kept buried, for the bridges built, the stories told, the huddles holding on to homes that bulldozers could never erase, for the leap into a city of its own, for seeing hope and groundbreaking dreams. Home here knows how to hold when the ground starts to shake, how to duck, how to move, how to dance, how to sing, how to love again and again when bedroom paint crumbles and the promise of better still feels like tomorrow. When childhood places become memories and footprints become open and available for those that are willing and open to find home. Home here makes your heart move when your neighbors remember you, asking, how are you and your dukes too? When the music is just bussin', when the smiles of someone you grew up with made it into something, when someone is simply winning. We find our way home, even when our buildings escape. Even in the morning and praying for a new place, we make our way back home. See, it takes more than bricks and mortar to make hearts heal, hearts feel. For daring and forgiving, it's the groundbreaking for unfolding and for sprouting. Dreams were built here, forming from rubble, sand to bricks, fear to joy, no lights to stars, nothing into something. We've had our fair share of spinning what could easily be forgotten into gold. Dreams here are the history mixed with opportunity, the advocacy of those that stood before me, baking bread to share, taking time to care. You see, dreams are the people holding true, standing strong, awakening to what is yet to come. The first lines of a melody, a song that reaches beyond a pen, beyond these doors, beyond a passion, beyond these floors. Dreams made all the difference here. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevelyan. I think you've set the perfect tone for this evening. So that was just wonderful. An amazing thing, too, both Thompson and Trevelyan will be performing at Kerner Hall at the Royal Conservatory of Music on June 21st of this year in the Songs from the Journey, a fundraising musical production written by our Fireside Chat, co-written by our Fireside Chat speaker, Mitchell Cohen. So I'm sure we're going to hear more about that later this evening. So a little taste. Okay, it is now my pleasure to call up our tonight's featured speakers to make their way up to the stage. So if you can do that, I'm going to make some introductions here. So Mayan Zev is the founder and CEO of Access Now, who will be tonight's moderator. And Mitchell Cohen, of course, president and CEO of the Daniels Corporation. Mitchell's going to get more of an introduction pretty much over the entire evening. So I want to just introduce Mayan, who some of you don't know, but many of you will. And we're thrilled that she's our Fireside Chat interlocutor. Mayan is an accomplished entrepreneur, acclaimed photographer, and passionate disability activist. She is the founder and CEO of Access Now, a tech company that has revolutionized the way people share and access information about accessibility worldwide. Under Mayan's leadership, Access Now has become a powerful force for change, driving a shift in global thinking, and I'll say also local thinking, about the importance of accessibility across all industries, from accessible technologies to infrastructure, public policy, media, and of course, the built environment, that is our industry. She is a globally recognized thought leader, advocate for disability rights, and a voice that has earned her numerous accolades, including MIT Tech Review's Top 35 Innovators and Canada's Top 40 Under 40. So, just one more thing before I hand it over to you, is we're going to take questions, audience questions, around roughly 7 o'clock, but start them coming ASAP. You should see there is the website, or the email rather. We're doing it old-fashioned email, so if you could do it that way, we figured this was probably our safest tech bet. Sorry to Mayan, who's a tech-savvy person, that you were seeing such lowbrow stuff here. You'll see that email address over, it'll be on the screen over the course of the conversation. So we'll look forward to some questions at the end, of course, but in the meantime, the main show is over to you, Mayan, to begin, and thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you, Richard. I'm very excited to be here. I told Mitch I'm a little nervous. This is a new role for me. So I have the pleasure and utmost honor to facilitate a conversation with yours truly over here, who I have learned a lot about. And I'm excited to get into a conversation with you, Mitchell.
I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you. So to start, I think what I learned is that a lot of people know about the Daniels Corporation, but not that many people know about you, the person. And I want to start when we go way back, looking at your origin story, which really started in co-op housing. What about that experience shaped the way that you would then go on to build your life and career?
Thank you for going deep into the past. So that's a wonderful way to start. I really appreciate that. My career in real estate really did begin when I was not in real estate. I was working as a community worker in Montreal. My very first job out of university, I went to McGill, and then I went to London School of Economics, came back to Montreal looking for a job. After graduating with 2 degrees, it was time for me to find what I was going to do. And I was playing music, I was writing songs, but I actually realized I needed to find a job. I know, like crazy, eh? So I opened the newspaper, and there it was. There was a help wanted ad, and it said, YMCA looking for a community worker. I said, well, okay, I've got a master's degree in social psychology. Oh, and it said, no experience required. Okay, I'm good for this. So I applied and I got a job for the YMCA in Montreal. And my assignment was to work in a very low-income community. A community actually very similar to Regent Park. It was built after the war. It was 3-story brick walk-ups. Very similar architecture. We've all seen these buildings. They were built by the government after the war for veterans returning from the war. And my assignment was to go into this neighborhood and work with tenants who were very challenged in that they were paying very low rents because that's all they could afford. But the real challenge was that the landlord allowed the buildings to deteriorate and deteriorate. It was a private landlord who had a vision that he was going to demolish these buildings and create condominiums. This was 1973. Yes, I'm that old. Just saying. So I'm doing health programming and youth programming with kids in the neighborhood. We had a seniors program I was running for the YMCA. And one day I'm in my office. And get this, my office was in the basement apartment in one of these 3-story brick walk-ups that had been an apartment, but there was a fire in it. And of course, the landlord boarded it up. And we knocked on his door and said, we need an office for our YMCA program. So he gave me an office in the basement. And I was in this basement apartment when one day, about 35, 40 tenants come storming into my office. And they were desperate. And they were carrying, literally, get this, a pink slip. And it was eviction notice. The tenants had been living on 30-day, month-to-month leases. And they had 30 days to find a new place to live at a time in Montreal when the vacancy rate was less than 1%. So there was nowhere. There was nowhere to go, and certainly there was no affordable housing. Mayan, that was the moment. That was the moment that I realized I needed to do something. I had an obligation to do something. I had a responsibility to do something. And here's a kind of clue to what has unfolded over so many decades is being attuned to what is happening in the world around us. Because literally 2 weeks before the tenants came into my office, I'd read an article in the Montreal Gazette, and it said, CMHC announces new program to support tenants to form housing co-ops. Well, holy shit, I mean, holy doodle. And I remembered that article. And so I called CMHC, and they said, hey, yeah, we have a program, and we'll provide some startup funding. All you have to do is write a letter, bring it to our office, and no one else has applied for this program, so if you write the letter, you'll probably get it. We were first in the door, literally, first in the door for this program. And the program was allowing startup funding of up to $10,000 to allow a community group to research, to figure out, is it possible to buy the buildings, renovate the buildings, or lease them and turn them into a housing co-op? So I typed it out on my typewriter, I drove it up to CMHC headquarters, and the next morning I get a phone call. Come and pick up your letter of approval. Now, have you ever seen bureaucracy work like that? Literally, I have never, ever seen that happen since. So I drove up and I got the letter, and it's like on this beautiful CMHC stationery with the red flag of Canada. And that letter was the leverage that we needed to take to City Council and say, look, oh, by the way, the letter gave an approval for $8,800. Why? I have no idea. But $8,800, that's what was approved, but that was the ticket. And we took that letter and we marched on City Hall, 300 of us, and so basically did a sit-in, stand-in, whatever you call it. We had the press there, and it was at a council meeting at which the developer was looking to get a demolition permit because the tenants had been given 30 days to get out. And so the landlord's looking for his demolition permit that night. And with 300 of us, the tenants in the chambers, council said, no, you know what, maybe we shouldn't do this. And they gave us 6 months to use the funding in that startup funding in order to do the research and in order for me to do something I'd never done before, which was negotiate a purchase or a lease from the landlord who wanted to demolish the buildings. And that was my first experience negotiating with anybody. But the results were amazing, and the housing co-op was created with government funding. And that housing co-op exists today. I actually was in Montreal last September, visited the co-op. The mortgage, it was a 35-year mortgage, has been paid off. And this was all done with government financing. And we'll come back to this perhaps as a theme throughout the thing in terms of how does government create affordable housing? Guess what? It takes a significant investment, and I'll pause on that. But thank you for asking. It was that moment that really changed my life.
Mm-hmm. And definitely there are a few threads in what you've just shared already in terms of government involvement, community engagement, some social innovation that we're going to unpack as well. But I want to also, as we look kind of at your trajectory from those early days, the relationship between you and John Daniels. And despite the age gap, yes, we're moving a little bit forward now from those early days in Montreal, but you two built a phenomenal company that went from 3 people to 450.
So I'm told.
Or so he's told. And you've created nearly 40,000 homes for people of all ages and all incomes. Can you talk to me a little bit about that foundation and that relationship?
For sure. I love to talk about Jack. I mean, his name is John Daniels, but we all knew him and called him Jack, and many of you knew Jack. Yeah. So, Mayanne, I finished creating the co-op, or working with the tenants. We built this co-op in Montreal. And I stayed in Montreal for a few years after that, playing in a couple of bands. I had an R&B band and a jazz trio, and I was writing songs. I had a music label. Get this, Fix It in the Mix Music. It was amazing. And I was biding time because the co-op had been finished, and I had worked myself out of that job. And in 1979, my wife Janice was ready, had finished school. We were ready to move to Toronto. We moved to Toronto. Neither of us had a job. And I was very fortunate in that I landed a job at the Co-op Housing Federation of Toronto. And there, we began to create co-ops in Toronto under the same government program that existed that we'd worked on in Montreal. And in the course of doing that, we bought a piece of land, the Co-op Housing Federation, on behalf of a seniors housing group at Eglinton and the Allen Expressway. And we built a co-op called the Winona Housing Co-op, a seniors co-op. And we built that on a piece of land that was owned by Cadillac Fairview Development Corporation. So in the course of that, I got to meet a bunch of executives from Cadillac. Little did I know at the time who the chairman of Cadillac was, this god of real estate, this sort of mythical figure up there in the stratosphere, because I didn't get to meet him at that point in time. But then one day, it's 1982, and I'm in my office, and again, I kind of like these derelict office stories. The office at CHFT, Co-op Housing Federation of Toronto at that moment, was in a building that we all know. It's on Queen Street. Les Klein is here, because Les renovated and designed the renovation of that building. It's City TV building now, or CTV. There's this truck coming out of the side of the building. I have no idea, Les, how you did that, but put that aside. That is where our office was before it was bought by whoever bought it back in the day. I'm sitting in my office, and I get a phone call from one of the vice presidents at Cadillac Fairview. Is this Mitchell Cohen? Yeah, it's Mitchell Cohen. The chairman would like to meet you. Like, what are you talking about? No, I'm serious. The chairman would like to meet you, and he'd like to meet you now. So this was a VP of Cadillac saying that John Daniels, because I didn't know him as Jack at that moment, wanted to meet me because he heard from his people that I knew everything there was to know about co-op housing. And he wanted to learn everything about co-op housing in one easy lesson, so his team said, call Mitchell Cohen. So there I was in my torn jeans, in my sweater with patches. This is how Jack remembers the story. It probably wasn't that bad. My hair was down to here. And I go marching down Queen Street to Cadillac Fairview's office, because literally it was, he would like to meet you now. So I go down the office to Cadillac's office, and before I get a chance to go in to meet the man, I'm screened by 5 different vice presidents. Kid you not. They want to make sure who is a socialist, weird, hippie dude that's gonna, we don't want to be embarrassed because we're going to introduce you to the chairman. So I met Jack finally. And we had this remarkable conversation about affordable housing, about co-op housing. And he was a very impressive man. Jack was so well dressed, as those of you who knew him, always impeccably dressed. And here's me in my finery. But we hit it off in that moment, really hit it off. That was 1982. And in 1984, when the federal government terminated all co-op housing funding, I had, in terms of my work at Co-op Housing Federation, no more work to do, no more co-ops to build. There was no more federal government money. That was an important change, by the way, which impacted all of us today and for years from today, in that the federal government got out of supporting affordable housing. Again, we can talk more about affordable housing. But in 1984, I made a phone call on my rotary phone to the VP at Cadillac Fairview who had called me And I said, dude, what's going on? Is there anything happening at Cadillac? You know, maybe I'm looking for a job. And he said, what? You know, you should call Jack. He left Cadillac Fairview. He started a new company. Here's his phone number. And he gave me his phone number, and I called John Daniels, because I still didn't know him as Jack. And he was looking for someone to build a company. It was 1984. He had left Cadillac Fairview and put together a group of people who bought a kind of little small land assembly. It was 4,700 acres. You know, it was just this little thing that he had put together with Cadillac Fairview called Aaron Mills. So Jack, with a group of partners, had purchased this land, and a gentleman named Marco Muzzo was going to be the head guy, the developer, who's going to run the day-to-day operation of Aaron Mills, and Jack was going to be a passive investor. But in his words, I flunked retirement. And he decided to start a small development construction company, and he needed somebody to run it. And at that moment is when I called him. And we met, and we chatted, and within 2 conversations, we shook hands. And we shook hands on an agreement that was pretty simple. And the agreement was, he had a couple conditions, and I had one simple condition. Which one should I tell you first? Who do you want to hear first? My condition was really simple. I'm coming from the nonprofit sector, Mr. Daniels. And if there is ever an opportunity to create affordable housing, as a private sector company, I want to be able to do it. And I want to do it well. Because at the Co-op Housing Federation of Toronto, I had done many, many deals with private sector developers who didn't want to do it. They did it in the early 80s because they had to do it. We think interest rates are bad today. Interest rates in 1981, 82, 83 were 18%, 19%, 20%, thank you. And they didn't want to do it, and so every single community we built was a struggle because they didn't want to be doing it. I said, Jack, sorry, Mr. Daniels, not yet. I want to do it, and I want to do it well. I want to build a business that is not entirely affordable housing, but it really can be rooted in the creation of affordable housing. And Jack said, okay, if you can demonstrate that this is a business plan that will work, let's do it. But now I've got my conditions. I said, and I was just waiting for the shoe to drop. He said, I'm going to buy you 5 suits and 10 ties. And here's a phone number. Go visit my, whatever, haberdasher? I don't know what they're called. So I bought a few suits on Jack's ticket as a signing bonus, and I wore them for about a week. And then I became who I am again, thanks God. And finally, Mayanne, to answer your question, Jack and I had an amazing relationship in that he totally allowed me and ultimately the team that came together. Mark Guslitz is in the crowd here somewhere. Mark became a partner at Daniels. A whole other group of people we brought in. I brought in many from the co-op housing sector to join me at Daniels. And Jack gave us the ability to build a company with a vision that we could always look to what we're doing as a way to make a positive impact and as a way to create affordable housing, to use the platform of our business as really a tool for progressive social change. Jack bought into that on minute 1, and he lived it through to 38 years of a partnerip.
Wow, that's quite the story.
Kind of long. Sorry about that.
That's a good one. Let's talk about affordable housing.
Okay.
So it's no surprise to anyone in this room, we are living in what is an affordable housing crisis. There are people who need homes that can't afford homes. There are places going up everywhere that are being developed with perhaps, I'm just going to throw it out there, not the most affordable housing strategy to ensure that people can actually find homes. Given your experience in the space, what is it going to take to address this crisis?
Oh boy. Well, this is the big issue.
Yeah.
For all of us, for all Canadians, for every one of us. It's one, thank God, it has now reached a point in the national conversation where it is top of mind. But, you know, the thing that really boggles my mind is that when people think, well, you know, how did this happen? Like, we have this crisis, oh my God, how did this crisis? The crisis happened, you know, as I said earlier, in 1984, the federal government basically said that housing is a provincial responsibility. And for a number of years here in Ontario, the Ontario provincial government, 1986 to 1995, took on that responsibility with gusto and built thousands of affordable homes. In 1995, the Ontario Conservative government, newly elected under Mike Harris, and it was under this banner of a common sense revolution. I don't know, you don't remember that, right? Of course you do. Common sense revolution, we're going to cut all support for affordable housing, and there's going to be this natural sort of balance in the market. And the market forces will take care of themselves, and affordable housing will get built. Well, oh my God, guess what? Not happening. Didn't happen. So the federal government, the provincial government in Ontario were absent, missing in action for decades. City of Toronto did some really fine work. Peter, you were at the city and you did some fine work with Mark and others, you know, finding like little ways to stitch together some affordable housing, but without a national strategy, without significant investment, and at the municipal level, without a requirement to integrate affordable housing into new communities, guess what? We have a crisis. Affordable housing has not been built. I mean, looking back over the last 20, 30 years, you know, how many cranes have been in our skies in the city of Toronto? More than any other city in North America or maybe the world, without a requirement that affordable housing be built in, be integrated, be part of the fabric of every new community. There has been talk for decades about inclusionary zoning, but it's never really come to be part of what happens here in our milieu. So more and more condominiums get built, more and more today rental buildings get built, and there's very little affordable housing. Now, are there announcements? Well, I'm sure you've all been hearing over the last couple of days, couple weeks in fact. The federal government is responding to the fact that there's an election coming. What a surprise. And in the lead up to the fear that they haven't done anything, they have been making a whole bunch of announcements. Well, hallelujah, that's good. And there's some elements in there that will be very helpful. But it's also this thing about the fine print and what comes after the budget announcement, and a disconnect, and no disrespect to my friends from CMHC who are in the audience, please. But there is often a disconnect between the policy statements and the government announcements that the minister makes and CMHC and their ability to actually implement a program. And I'll give you one example. There's many, but one very recent example, Mayanne. Many, many years ago, our company created a program similar to one that Options for Homes has done, you know, a little different. We created our own program. It's a down payment assistance program, providing shared equity second mortgages. We did this in 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9. We did it here in Regent Park, creating pathways to home ownership for people that otherwise would never be able to afford the down payment. And with these programs, they were hugely successful. Now, the government in 2017-18, when they did, the federal government create a national housing strategy, came up, probably announced in 2018, with a first-time buyer's incentive. Huge fanfare, huge announcement. $1.4 billion is going to help tenants create that transition into home ownership. They announced this thing, we look at the fine print, we look at the regulations, and the program provided 10% down payment assistance. Well, guess what? That program worked for us in 2005 and 2006, and the down payment assistance programs we did then with 10% down payment assistance worked because the price of the home was here. When the price of the home is here, the program doesn't work. So they announced this program. They're unable to spend the $1.4 billion. So about 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they canceled the program. Now, they're in the midst of announcing a whole bunch of new programs, so that one kind of got shuffled away and no one heard too much about it. They canceled the program when they could have easily said to CMHC, open up the parameters of the program, provide down payment assistance to a much higher level so that a tenant can afford to become a homeowner. But they didn't do that. They canceled the program. So am I optimistic? They are putting a lot of money on the table. Will they put the heft and the regulations behind it that will create affordability, that will allow these programs to really impact people in our communities that want to either rent an affordable home or buy a home that would be affordable? Mayanne, I'm not confident, sadly. But we will push them, as many of you in this room will push, for programs that actually work. Because that's the problem. It's easy to make big policy announcements, but the programs have to work and have to create affordable housing, not for 10 years. And that was one of their programs that they announced back in 2017-18. 10 years of affordability. Wrong. This is bad, bad policy. Affordable housing needs to be created with significant government investment so that it is affordable in perpetuity. That's what has to happen. And there's a real disconnect between the cost of creating a home today, the affordability requirement that people, this is what people can afford, and there's this enormous equity gap. And the government keeps ignoring the fact that in order to close that gap, a significant investment of cash is needed. There's no magic. There's no magic, it's mathematics. The gap has to be closed with money. And the money has to come from all of us. This is a national problem. This is a national challenge. All of us as taxpayers have to make a contribution to that, and the government has to understand. It just is not going to happen by making announcements with air. There has to be money behind it. Sorry, I've gone on.
No. I think you're speaking about something that touches all of us. And for the people in this room, we have different roles to play. I mean, the difference even between your role and my role, but still both contributing to this crisis in very different forms. That definitely leads to a segue where we can talk about inclusion. Okay. We can talk about accessibility. I know that it's something that has become increasingly something that I've learned in working with Daniels Corporation that you've shown leadership on. First with the ADP, the Accessible Design Suites, and now the Accelerating Accessibility Coalition. What is the importance of accessibility within the strategy that you're speaking about?
You used at the very beginning the word inclusion, and thank you for using that word, because it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. We're going to create inclusive communities. And I hear that all the time. And I hear it at the city, municipalities, I hear it from planners. Inclusion. What does it mean? Mm-hmm. It has to have a number of different components under this umbrella of inclusion for it truly to have an impact. Affordability is at the root of it. We have to create communities that are affordable. So we've talked a little bit about that. We have to create communities in which people have opportunities to work, to grow, to go to school, to get supported, to not just have a job, but a career path. I mean, bridging that economic disparity is a hugely important part of that inclusion umbrella. But to your point, accessibility. Accessibility is something that we have just been missing the boat on accessibility. And for us, I think the journey around accessibility began probably 2016. And some of our team members are here. Rose, Sonia, people on our team who work with our homeowners and hear from our homeowners. You know, I'm in a suite and the suite is designed to barrier-free standards, but I can't live in it. And we started to hear that. And so we kind of took on this mission to understand what that meant. You know, the building code has barrier-free standards, and we have to build a certain percentage of all the suites in all of our buildings to those building code barrier-free standards. So we listened to some people in the industry, in the design and architectural community. Leslie from BDP Quadrangle, one of your colleagues, Laureen Casillas, helped us with this. And Laureen introduced us to Luke at one point in time. And then Jake, my son, our COO, met Luke, and along with Adam Molson of our team, you know, did what Luke calls a roll-through. And oh my God, Luke opened our eyes, because Luke, you spoke to us in real terms saying, no, this is not good enough. This doesn't work. And here are some of the things that need to be done so that I or others who have mobility challenges can actually feel welcome, included, can have that sense of inclusion. So Luke, your input was invaluable. That led our team to start thinking about, okay, building barrier-free, lowest common denominator, not enough. We have to do better. So we developed our own set of design standards, ADP, Accessibility Design Program. And we began implementing those in our buildings. And the feedback and the response we had from people who had been looking for a home that they could truly feel at home, that changed us forever. You know, Tim Rose and Natalie, who live across the street, who moved into one of our ADP suites, they told us they've been looking for 10 years for a home that they could actually manage and live comfortably and feel like they're part of the community. It was those moments that really led us to understand that we're onto something hugely important that we just have to stay at. We have to keep doing this. We have to keep learning more about how to build buildings, but not just buildings, communities that are truly inclusive. And Mayan, that's when we met you, which was a wonderful introduction. And we met and we did a map mission, and some of the people from Marlene was on the map mission, others from Regent Park were on the map mission here. And it was, again, this wonderful learning experience. Mayan and Access Now do these map missions. And the idea is to roll through, to walk through, to go through a community and really experience what's working and what doesn't work. And I won't say the commercial tenant that we have in here that you looked at and you couldn't use the bathroom because it was filled with storage materials. I mean, this happens everywhere in our city, that even building the barrier-free use means that they're not usable. So that was so helpful for us to understand, you know, that we need to implement, we need to, in terms of the commercial spaces, be talking to our tenants all the time about ensuring that their spaces remain accessible. But all of those conversations really led us to this moment, and it was the summer of 2022. And it was this moment that I realized we could, and we should, and we needed to do more. And I spent the entire summer of 2022 on Zoom calls with you, with Luke, with many, many people from the accessibility community, learning, listening, understanding the challenges, and beginning to put together a coalition of people who came together to say, let's spread this word. Let's bring in developers. Let's bring in designers. Let's create a coalition that is going to raise this to the top of the agenda, that is going to actually not wait for the building code to be amended. It will be amended in the fullness of time, but when it is, it's probably still the lowest common denominator, and it may not reach the standards that we might all want. But fast forward to the end of that summer, and the team from ULI, Richard, wherever you are, and Linda, came to the table, and together we co-created this thing called the Accelerating Accessibility Coalition. And if you're hearing about this for the first time, hopefully you'll go and you'll check it out, Accelerating Accessibility. Join the coalition, because this is an important movement for our industry, for all of us, to really understand that we can and we need to do more. ULI is acting as the secretariat, and really appreciate that support. And it's essential. And some of the developers in this room have joined the AAC, and we're thrilled about that. Derek, Northcrest, Cadillac Fairview, a whole bunch of others have joined, and we need to spread that word. And every building that we build today has to think beyond the simple barrier-free requirements of the building code.
Ooh. So clearly you're passionate. And I keep hearing the word progressive. Daniels is progressive as a developer. Something that I had a chance to learn about is the importance of community engagement within all the work that Daniels does. And I'd love for us here to learn about the strategies and the importance and the way that community engagement happens. Words like grassroots and co-creation are not maybe typical words used to talk about a development. But in your book...
My book?
That I...
Way to go, Maya.
that I will talk about, that I had a chance to get a glimpse at, I learned a lot about what that means. And it's quite tangible. I'd love if you could share with us, what does that mean? How do you build authentic community engagement? And if I can just add, what is a community?
Whoa. Where do I start? Thank you for referencing the book.
I had to.
I know. I have indeed written a book. After 18 years working in Regent Park, after 18 years working in Regent Park, I felt it was time. And just, a very quick note on what kickstarted that, and then I'll come back to your answer, I promise. Last summer, we've been working in this community in partnership with Toronto Community Housing for 18 years, and it's been slow and deliberate and intentional and one step forward and a few steps back, but phenomenal progress has been made. And last summer, there was an article in the Toronto Star, and I wasn't sure what to make of this headline, but it said, "What happened to Regent Park?" That was the headline. And when I read on, the article was very positive, talking about the evolution of the community. And I realized in that moment that maybe it was time for me to actually tell our story of what happened to Regent Park, because we've been in it, at the heart of it, in the center of it, with our partner, Toronto Community Housing, for 18 years. But more importantly, as importantly, in a partnership with this community. What is a community? I don't know. I mean, a community is people who live and care about where they live. And in caring about where they live, they're connecting with each other. and they're talking to each other, and most importantly, they're listening to each other. And so our role in coming into this community was pretty simple. We had to come in and listen before we could do anything. And we did that. In 2005 and 2006, we came in and we knocked on doors and we walked down the streets and we met people and we listened. And we learned and we heard the aspirations of people about the community that they loved, which was Regent Park that they had lived in for decades. And that was a Regent Park that people from outside Regent Park didn't know. People from outside Regent Park had this vision of a place to avoid, as a place to, if you happen to be driving along Dundas Street, roll up your windows, lock the doors, and don't stop. That was the Regent Park that most of Toronto knew. But when we came into the neighborhood and began listening, the love of the neighborhood, the love of the neighbors, the sense, the passion for community, for people having each other's backs, for people being there for each other, was just astounding. And it just really struck us that we have a role to play, but that role has to be gentle, thoughtful, respectful, probably more than anything. And it has to be based on what is it that will be the positive outcome for people in this neighborhood. So it's been 18 years. There's been a lot that's accomplished. Richard and Alex, thank you for being here. It's meaningful. And you should have all of them here, just by the way. Because we want to bring people, more people to Regent Park who have never been here, who were maybe afraid to come into Regent Park back in the day, but no more. Regent Park is a place that people want to be part of. And that transformation is something that I do write about in the book. And it's about the people of this neighborhood as much as anything else. And it's celebrating the people of this neighborhood. I don't know if I answered your question at all, but...
You did.
did?
I'm going to
I'm not
go
sure.
a little further with you on this.
Okay.
How do you build authentic relationships as the newbie within a space that has a community that's already living? How do you listen? When people say, oh no, we can't do it, it's too hard. What you have proven with your team, the ability to socially innovate. How? Like what does it look like?
Well, again, it comes down to listening and learning about the incredible resilience of people in this neighborhood, the skills of people in this neighborhood, what people in this neighborhood can bring to the table to add value to what is happening in the co-creation of a community, because I think that's what's most important. Yeah. This is not about us, it's not about the TCH team, it's about all of us together, co-creating a community by listening to each other and by being sensitive to what's happening. And you know what it means? It means, and Gila and I and our team talk about this always, it's about being there. That's what's important. We're not in an ivory tower office building looking down on the world and saying, oh, okay, what are we going to do? No, we're on the ground. Because being on the ground is the only place that you can really hear what's happening and therefore respond in a way that is going to result in the kind of outcomes that people are hoping for. And if we can be a catalyst to those outcomes, then we are being successful. Mm-hmm. Again, I have no idea if I'm
No,
answering your
it
questions.
makes sense to me. No, thank you for that. And I'm getting a signal based on the screen
Oh,
that,
what?
that
Come on.
you know,
No
if you've
way.
got a question, you might want to send an email. So please do feel free to do that. I don't know how we're facilitating that, but I have one or two more questions, and then let's go to the room. Music.
Music.
So music is a big part of your life.
Yeah.
And some might think, how do these worlds come together? How is development, real estate, community building, and songs or musicals, how do those worlds come together? So my question to you is, how has music played a role in your professional and personal life?
So how far do I go back? How about this? My bubby's piano. My bubby bought me a piano when I was probably 7 years old. That's where it goes back to. And I took Royal Conservatory piano lessons, as many people may have. And I didn't last very long. I got to grade 4. And I dropped out because my teacher at the time was whapping my hand with a ruler. But, you know, that was maybe the way it worked then. It doesn't work that way now. But I had the good fortune of being invited to join Max Uditsky's rock and roll band. You want to know the name of our band? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Jaywalker and the Pedestrians. Now, isn't that the greatest band? The greatest name for a band, seriously. Jaywalker and the Pedestrians. We should have been huge just for the name itself. So this was in Regina. And, you know, we played high schools and whatever. I just got to tell you about one gig that we had. It was at Regina Beach. Mark Kindrachuk is here, who also grew up in Regina. We played Regina Beach, and there's one tavern, one sort of bar in Regina Beach. And in the summer, we had this gig playing there on Saturday nights. And we'd be playing, you know, Gloria, Louie Louie, you know, all the big, big hits that were hits at that moment in time, 1966, 1967. And inevitably, at 10:30, a fight would break out right in front of us. Boom, boom, and like these people would just be hammering each other. And it was the cottagers against the locals, and it's like one year the cottagers were dominant, one year the locals were dominant, and it was insane. But we would just, you know, play Johnny Be Good. And we would rock, and the whole thing would just happen in front of us. And at the end, people would be dancing, and like the party would go on. Okay, I'm going somewhere now. The thing about music and my appreciation and love of playing, for me, it's about jamming. It's not formal, it's informal. And what is jamming? Because this does relate, I think, to where you're going. Jamming is 100% about listening. It's about, what are you playing? How do I listen to what you're playing and hear the nuance in what you're playing and respond to it? And it's a conversation. And I think in that way, it's always been in me to be a listener and to understand the importance of hearing, responding, hearing the nuance, responding, adding, throwing something in. And that's what music has given me, is this ability to really think about what other people are doing and hear it and respond in real time. And so music has been a huge part of my life in various bands over many, many years. I had a band in the 90s. I wonder if any of you were at my show. We played the O'Keefe Center. Do you remember the O'Keefe Center? Yes. Yeah, of course. 1995. It's May of 1995. My band was called Another Life. Why? Because I'm a real estate developer. So I had this band. It was a 10-piece R&B band. We were called Another Life, and we had this amazing gig at the O'Keefe Center, opening for Aretha Franklin. Imagine that, seriously. It was crazy. So I was the manager of the band. I had a day job called the Daniels Corporation. But I was managing the band, promoting the band, writing songs for the band with Henry Heilig and Richard Arfin, songwriting partners. And we opened for Aretha Franklin. And Aretha was sick that night. She came and she played, but she was in such a bad mood. And just, Liz Tansey was our lead singer. And Liz could sing Aretha like amazing, like phenomenal. She could channel Aretha, and she loved Aretha. And we're down in our dressing room at the O'Keefe Center, and she's got the very first album that Aretha ever put out. And she's hoping to meet Aretha and have Aretha sign it. And we're down there, and we're in the hallway, and we're waiting for Aretha to come in for the sound check. And Aretha comes in with 6 bodyguards, I kid you not. And they usher her into, and they've got their little walkie-talkies, and they're, okay, all clear, let's go. And they usher her into her room. And poor Liz did not get her autograph that night. But we were outstanding. We blew the house away. It was phenomenal. Probably no one here was in that show. Too bad. Mm-hmm. That was May 1995. June 8th, 1995, what happened? Mark? Anybody? June 8th, 1995 was when Mike Harris was elected. The next morning at 8 a.m., I kid you not, an email went out to everyone involved in the not-for-profit sector saying all programs are shut down, canceled, terminated, over. And our team had like 13 projects in the pipeline, affordable housing projects that we were doing, lots of co-ops, private nonprofits, municipal nonprofits in partnership with a whole range of not-for-profits terminated. And we wonder why we have an affordable housing crisis. But what that meant is, guess what? I had to kill the band. Sadly, because I had other things to focus on. But what happened is I began writing more and more songs. And we started our work here in Regent Park. Maybe I'm going on too long here. I started our work here in Regent Park, and the day that we demolished the very first building, momentous day in the life of this community, and I'm there with, Pam McConnell and Mark and many, many other people from this neighborhood, residents of the neighborhood, Dee Dee Peters, who couldn't be here tonight. And I'm there, and the buildings are being demolished. And being demolished for the hope of a better future. So I went home that night and I wrote a song called My Piece of the City. And that song, a few years later, became the centerpiece of this musical that you've referred to, called The Journey Musical. And yes, we're presenting songs from The Journey at Kerner Hall on June 21st. Be there or be square. Richard is in the wings. Maybe that means something.
I think so. Do I have time for one more question, Richard? Okay, last question. Just to kind of bookend the future. We started with your origin. We talked about, your roots, where you started. In 20 years from now, what would you hope to see? And if you can, any advice for people in the audience on ways to be part of that impact?
There are many ways for all of us in this room to be part of the impact on creating a better future for all of us here in Toronto and across the country. Accessibility is one way that we can all make an impact. We can be pushing the affordability envelope, as I said earlier. We need to. In 20 years, I really hope that I'll be still very young then. I hope that I will look at Toronto and I will look at the Ontario line that is being built, and I will see affordable housing at every single station. Mayanne, I look at the Crosstown LRT and it makes me crazy. That whole, how many years? A lot of years. And there's these things that are the stations, and these things don't have housing above it. What a wasted, what a lost opportunity. I hope in 20 years I will see that. I think in 20 years what I'll see, though, is some amazing communities that either have been built or are in the process of being built. Because there is so much that people in this room, and many of you are here that are working right now today on communities like Downsview, like East Harbor, which are enormous at-scale opportunities to demonstrate what can be done with very thoughtful approach to development, with inclusion at the top of the formula, top of the umbrella, underneath that umbrella of inclusion. I think there's an enormous opportunity. And people in this room and the people that I meet with, we all have the opportunity to impact that future. And we just have to have our eyes open and, more importantly, have our ears open, because we can make an impact, every one of us.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for that. I could listen to you talk for hours and tell stories. And I think we have a few questions,
Yes.
perhaps?
And I'm going to facilitate. So we as mentioned, we asked people to submit questions, and many of you have. So more than I even anticipated. So I'm doing my best to consolidate some of these themes that have come in by way of questions. But you just spoke at the very end, Mitchell, to communities, and that was definitely one of the big themes in the questions that came out. And I want to be more specific with some of the questions really speaking to what do we mean when we say we're building communities with community partnerships. I think you used the word community leadership. Obviously, that was part of the Regent Park story. It is, someone asked a question around you're very involved in the Golden Mile. We've been doing a lot of work recently in the Jane Finch spaces, corridor rather. I think we're evolving our sense of what that community partnership needs to look like. And I think maybe if I could get you to speak to your sense of maybe from your experience, but maybe going forward, the evolution of what does community partnership look like when working with the private sector on the redevelopment of many, many communities across Toronto.
Brilliant, thank you. You mentioned Golden Mile, you mentioned, and I was mentioning some of the larger redevelopments that are happening. You know, what is truly incredible that has been evolving right here in Toronto is this movement around inclusive local economic opportunity. I know it's a handle, but it's called ILEO. And Juliana from Greater Toronto, from United Way Greater Toronto, is here. And ILEO is this incredible movement that started at the United Way, but with BMO as well, Daryl White. And the idea of ILEO is to bring people together, is to be very intentional about the opportunity to collaborate and create partnerships. So ILEO started with 20 corporate leaders. And the idea was to bring CEOs to the table who could then have influence on their corporations and really roll out a philosophy around community development. But the key thing that United Way and Daryl White did was not just have corporate leaders, CEOs at the table, but community leaders. And it was remarkable in those first meetings where we got together with 20 amazingly powerful CEOs and 20 amazingly powerful community leaders from the Golden Mile. And many of those CEOs of nonprofits or executive directors of nonprofits were at that table saying, we have never met a CEO of a big corporation, of a bank, of MLSE who was at the table. President of University of Toronto. This is cross-sectoral. This is institutional. This is business. This is nonprofit, all coming together to say, how can we together build community? And it's remarkable. This is a Made in Toronto movement that is going to be replicated. It's already being projected around the world by our friends from the World Urban Pavilion just down the street, who are speaking to people around the world about how do you create inclusive communities. Well, the ILIO model is an amazing benchmark for how to do that. And what's incredible is that the CEOs are in it. And if the CEOs are in it, all of their team members are in it. Hiring, creating pathways, not just, as I said before, to a job, but a career. Creating funding for programming, creating scholarships. Being, and here's what's amazingly fun and creative about it, being on the ground in community. Coming out of the big tower downtown, into Golden Mile, into a TCH building in Golden Mile and meeting with TCH tenants and listening. So Richard, this is a really important movement, and kudos to United Way for leading it, and BMO, and to all of the CEOs, and to the nonprofits who see there's a real opportunity here. And that's really exciting about something happening. There's a lot of exciting things, but that's an exciting thing happening here in Toronto.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yay, ILIO.
I'm gonna see if I can elegantly smash a few questions together into one, but a lot of questions related to affordability. Some of it was speaking it to the issue of ownership versus rental, and where affordability seems to be having a frontier that is more on the rental side than the ownership side, and yet wealth creation is harder to achieve through rental traditionally. And so there's some questions around whether that may be a short-term way to get to affordability quicker, but it may not be helping elevate wealth with communities that may not have as much. And so there's a bit of a question around that. But inside of the rental package, this is me smashing too much into one question. And I won't do the environment. I was gonna try to get an environmental piece into this, but I'll come back to it. I'll have another question. Inside of rental, when we talk about affordability, we're using definitions that are more rent geared to average market rent, AMR, versus income. And just wondering if you could maybe speak to a definition of affordability that perhaps we should be focused on that for a city like Toronto.
The City of Toronto, I think, has recently developed some affordability guidelines that are more based on income than what it costs to rent, which is the average market rent approach that CMHC has used for decades. And I think the benchmark that people are using more and more in terms of a definition of affordability is 30% of median household income as a target. Now, that's a target that is not really achievable for many, many people living in our communities who can't afford any of the new buildings that are being built without government assistance that is going to bring that down lower. So government has a role to play, as I've said, but I want to also note that the philanthropic community has a role to play in input of cash, of investment in affordability. Because collectively, if we can bring affordable housing and make it available to people across our city, you know what's going to happen? We're going to decrease the cost of health care. And that is so important. Housing, affordable, safe, secure, affordable housing is a primary social determinant of health. We don't need to debate that. It's not up for grabs. It's reality. We need to create affordable housing, and we will reduce the cost of health care. And so what we have been doing is really pushing foundations to understand that. not to abandon investments in medical research or hospitals, but to expand, to make investments in affordable housing. And just to the rental versus ownership, there's no question that thousands of rental units are under construction and more will be built. And at this moment in time, none of those units will be affordable. None of them. At the 30% level, let alone at a level that someone on social assistance can afford. So to bring it down to that lower level, enormous investment is needed from government, from the philanthropic sector. Developers have a role to play, but it's not the developer's responsibility to create that opportunity. We can facilitate, we can welcome an integration of affordability into every one of our buildings, and we need to do that. And we've done it, and we've seen how it works. We've done it right here in Regent Park, just down the street, where Woodgreen has welcomed 34 of their young women with families, with kids, into a market rental building, living on the 3rd floor, 8th floor, 6th floor, living here integrated, disappearing into the fabric of a community. Integration. We can do that, but it takes someone, i.e. government or philanthropy, helping Woodgreen do that. The models exist. There's no mystery about how to do this. We know how to do it. It's the money that doesn't exist at this moment.
Okay, thank you for that. 2 more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. You get to pick. One of them has Polyev in the question, and the other has Artscape in the question. Artscape. Let's go there first. We'll leave Mr. Polyev to the very end.
Or
you have to answer them both. Wasn't a pick, just the order. So, okay, Artscape. We are obviously in a building that is an Artscape project that Daniel's facilitated, Daniel's Spectrum. Things obviously went sideways with Artscape. I mean, that was and people are very concerned about Artscape was always a good idea. It's never stopped being a good idea, but it doesn't seem to be, whether it's by that brand or maybe conceptually, as viable going forward, or is it? Like, what is that we pick up out of the ashes of Artscape? And maybe just give you enough of a question there to, somewhere in there, there's a question you could pick up.
Definitely a question in there somewhere. Well, I'll give you a little bit of our perception of the Artscape story, because we were very much involved in it. I mean, this building is a co-creation of the community who were very much involved in ideating what a cultural center in Regent Park could be. And Don Schmidt was part of that, on the ground in this neighborhood. Jennifer Millard is here also at the time at Diamond & Schmidt, listening to the community with Artscape at the table, thinking about what this could be. So Artscape played an enormously important role for 30 years in our milieu, supporting artists, creating spaces, creating places for artists to feel at home and to have affordable places for studios, for living, for live work. And we were also involved not only in this, but in creating another space called Artscape Daniels Launchpad. And we built that space for Artscape, and we supported them in creating that space. And if any of you have been there or were there before it was shuttered, it was an incredible space with a really powerful idea to create this hub of entrepreneurship around the arts, of innovation around the arts. And I'll never forget, we opened that building, Artscape opened that building, literally a couple months before COVID. The idea was that that building, Launchpad, was going to be a membership-based organization. There were 650 members approximately that had joined up by the time we opened their Artscape. I keep saying we. By the time Artscape opened the doors, and COVID hit, and every artist who had joined had to be given their money back, of course, because no one was going anywhere for a month, for 2 months, or for years. And so Artscape had debt. Huge lesson to be learned. This building, we were fortunate to be able to build this building, finish it, raise the money for this building with zero debt. Hugely important. And this building was established with a governance structure that is local, that was not owned by Artscape, was owned by a local nonprofit arts organization that was created, through the work that TCH and we did with the local community. And so this building continues to exist, as does other cultural hubs around the city. So August of last year, the bank, who shall not remain nameless, Artscape's bank, TD, it's okay. Despite me talking to them endlessly, Artscape needs time. Artscape needs, your support. Put that aside. Once it gets into the hands of the special loans people, you're done, you're cooked. And it was delivered to the special loans people, the receivership was called, and out of that, Artscape, did disappear. But hallelujah, a new organization has emerged called Art Hubs Toronto. And Gila and myself and a number of other people who care about the arts in our city worked very hard for about 6 months to put together the foundation for Art Hubs Toronto. And an incredible organization came to the table that you all know, OCAD University. So OCAD came to the table to say, we're going to be involved in the resurrection of a new organization, the creation of a new organization that will become the steward of community hubs, including Daniel Spectrum, including Artscape. Now it's just called Young Place, no more Artscape, including Gibraltar Point. And Art Hubs exists today and has a management team that is solid, that is running this building on a day-to-day basis, has the support of OCAD University. And that is hugely important because OCAD has been around for 130 years or whatever it is, and will be around for another 130. And they are committed to this notion of being engaged in the community in a way that they haven't been before. So Art Hubs has created this opportunity for OCAD. And we're involved right now, I think, Gila, we have a meeting on Friday with OCAD to talk about all the different departments that are going to get engaged in the community hubs so that OCAD can really be instrumental in the rebirth of this organization that is so important to support artists across our city.
Wow, that was an excellent question, and that was a very, very interesting answer, and thank you for that. Listen, we are on tight on time, so I'm not going to ask the Poilievre question.
Oh.
Well, let me ask it very simply this. It's almost a kind of a positive, negative, and it's this. We're seeing the federal government, you cited in a couple of occasions, starting in the 80s, started pulling back. It's now in its third term of a government that feels like it may be running out of time. Come back, at least notionally, if we are to believe what we read. Do you think that the idea, whichever way election goes in the future, this is a durable return of the federal government to the housing space? Are you? I'm trying to make a simple answer because we don't have time. But are you encouraged, or are you sort of somewhat wait and see? How would you take that? Where are we at?
I'm not optimistic.
Okay.
At the federal level. I'm optimistic at the municipal level. Now, I've said before, we need federal dollars, but there's still a lot that the municipality can do. Municipality has tools. They need to use the tools. They need to harness those tools. They need to say that all of Danforth Avenue and Bloor Street and all these major arterials will have zoning as of right that is not 4 stories. How about 10 stories? We need to be able to build on our subways. We need to be able to build density where we have the infrastructure. Yes, the federal government is promising billions for more infrastructure, but we have not utilized the infrastructure in the ground appropriately. So will the next government, if it is not the Liberals, do more? I hope so. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Perfect. Anybody knows ULI, we always end on time, and I'm going to do it. First of all, I'm going to speak quickly. I want to thank, again, our guests, our Fireside Chat speakers, Mayanne and Mitchell, for an amazing, this is definitely one of the greats, and it'll be on tape, and we can watch this some years from now, but truly a milestone event to have you both here. So thank you very, very much. I also want to extend, a great thanks to Castles, to Diamond Schmidt, EXP, Giannone, Petricone and Associates, and NAC, who came in very late, not even in the script. So thank you, NAC. And we're going to be doing more stuff with you. We had a good conversation with you earlier. So big thank you to our program committee and our volunteers, my staff colleagues, amazing that we can pull together these things on an ongoing basis. We couldn't do it without your support, so thank you all. And holding off applause, I wanted to reference tonight was the Accelerating Accessibility Coalition. And we're going to rotate through these slides very quickly, but if you don't catch your company's logo in these slides, it's because you may not yet be part of this coalition. So the same email, toronto@uli.org, or you can find us on our website. You can reach out to us. We are the secretariat of this coalition, and we will set you up with a conversation. Will probably involve Luke, who's here. Luke, raise your hand. Is a co-chair, founding co-chair, and continue to be the co-chair. And we will tell you a little more about what that coalition is about. But we are growing it. It is only a year in, and we've got an amazing amount of support already. Lots of future events coming up. We've got next week an Earth Week every single day for the price of one webinar. You get 5. It's like a symposium at lunchtime over the whole week. So please tune into that. We have a ULI trip to Hamilton coming up via GO Train. The GO Train is actually part of the tour and talking about all the transit-oriented communities that are emerging along that line. So to learn more about Mitchell's book, you've got this information here, and you can get a QR code, I think, too, so that might be, but more to come. And, of course, the Journey, songs from the Journey at Kerner Hall, we're all going to be there, right? That looks like it'd be amazing, and you've had me totally sold on that one, so I'm looking forward to that. So, with that, I say goodnight, stay safe. The bar is open, is that true? No, it's not open. Yeah. I read everything that's written, so apologies. No bar, but there's more networking. So see you all soon. Thank you very much.